let me be devil's advocate here for a second.
Yeah.
So you're saying have compassion, be kind as though they were a cancer patient or something.
Yeah.
So now, what do you say to this when someone says, yeah, well, a cancer patient doesn't fucking steal my car. The cancer patient doesn't break into my bedroom and steal money out of my drawer. How am I supposed to be compassionate and show kindness if I can't have them anywhere near me?
Because you have to understand, number one, you're dealing with the behaviors of an addicted person. You're not dealing with the addicted person.
What's up, everybody? Usually I do a lot of editing and stuff to our episodes, lately especially, but I came to realize when I was recording this live stream with my friend Larry Foster that it is very important that I get this out before Christmas 2023. Now, there's a lot of good talking points and stuff in here for any time of the year. But because we're coming into Christmas right now, and because there was such valuable insights into how to get through it, I figured I was going to forego the perfection that I so often try to achieve and just let it slide and make sure that this message gets out before Christmas. So, here's my conversation with my friend Larry Foster. I hope you enjoy it. Merry Christmas. What's up, Larry?
Not much. Just happy to be here. Ready to answer any questions you have or any direction.
The reason I brought you here today, because we've had a lot of good conversations in the past, and what really solidified my desire to get you on the show was when we were at Prairie Sky Recovery Center's Recovery Days. And you were talking about family and relationship as it associates to substance use and addiction and recovery.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to talk about that because we are going into the Christmas season. This episode is not necessarily dedicated to the Christmas season, but there's going to be hopefully some tools that we can use to help people newly sober get through it.
Okay.
So is there anything you'd like to say before we jump in?
No, let's get at her, I guess.
All right, let's go.
This is Hard Knocks Talks.
Psych, I did edits with Latino music for some reason. All right, if you are struggling with the substance use of a loved one or have tragically lost a loved one to drug-related harms, reach out to Stronger Together Canada, peer-led support groups by Mums Stop the Harm. If you are in search of private inpatient addictions treatment, check out Prairie Sky Recovery Center located in Leipzig, Saskatchewan. If you are looking for help with criminal record suspensions, the Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan covers all associated costs for women or gender diverse individuals applying for criminal record suspensions. Reach out to Chelsea at 306-668-0653. To make contact or learn more about all of today's sponsors, check out our new merch, or if you want to show us some love and buy us a coffee, all of those links are in the show notes below on YouTube. I'm still...
We're back.
We're back again. Okay. Before we jump into these topics, I would like to know what led you to, like, what experiences did you have that led you to dedicating your professional career to helping not only people who use substances, but their families and loved ones?
Okay.
Yeah,
that's good. I sobered up in 1985, and through my employer's Employee and Family Assistance Program, through them, I ended up going through Larson House.
Old Larson House.
Old Larson House, yeah. It was like a picture out of the Munsters. Just a big old 4-story house. It was almost scary when I walked in. But I got in at about 5 to 8, and at 8 o'clock Friday night, they have a in-building or in-house AA meeting. And I walked in and sat down, and throughout the meeting, I'd always thought I was crazy. I thought I was nuts, that if I ever told anybody how I felt or what was going on in my life, that they would lock me up and I would never see the light of day again. And it went around the room, and a Native lady spoke. And for whatever reasons, I paid attention to what she had to say. And it was the first time in my life I realized that I was alcoholic and not crazy. Thinking I was crazy had kept me in addiction for about 5 years. And
I mean, there's a certain level of unwellness. I mean, maybe we may not classify it into the crazy realm, but
as far as I'm concerned now, from what I've learned now, 85% of our problem is the emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical problems that we have. And that's one of the things that we have to work on. I think that's vitally important for people to understand, is that only 15% of our problem is the fact that we use and abuse drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
The other 85% of the reasons why,
Mm-hmm.
like one of the things I was told very early in my recovery by one of the older gentlemen in my home group was that we were messed up long before we ever drank.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he stopped. And it sort of got that bump of curiosity, like Curious George has on the back of his head. I started scratching my head going, I got to figure out what that is.
Uh-huh.
And it took me a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I went through that process of working for my employer. I helped develop programming with their Employee and Family Assistance Program. I helped develop and implement the Critical Incident Response Program that my employer has now. I was the basic EFAP representative for the United Transportation Union Canada
Mm-hmm.
for a number of years. And then I retired. And then we had a variant in 2008, from 2008 to 2012. During that time, in 2010, my wife and I went and picked up our 3-year-old granddaughters, some twins, and we were going to take them into Saskatoon to buy their winter clothes and just do what grandparents do. And because we had the girls, their mother went for a couple of drinks, and on the way home, their vehicle hit a soft spot in the highway and rolled, and her and another woman were killed in the accident.
Wow.
Those girls never left the house. And that's where I started having to look at grief and loss and trying to find, a silver lining in that kind of a cloud. And it took a long time for my wife and I to get our heads around that.
Mm-hmm.
And what it boiled down to was that somebody more powerful than my wife and I decided that we had things to pass on to 2-3-year-old girls.
Mm.
Those girls stayed with us until about 4 years ago. They lived with us with their dad, and we put a roof over their head.
Mm-hmm.
While I was there, while they were just in the house and stuff, I decided that I wasn't going to go back up to the lake for the summer and leave my wife to raise the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were in our 60s when that happened. So I didn't go back to the lake, but I hadn't told anybody that I wasn't going. And then on March 12th, the phone rang at 9:15, and it was Ardith Wilson, the woman who owns PSR, or who started PSR.
Mm-hmm.
And after about a 10-minute conversation, I asked her, like, are you offering me a job? And she said, yeah, I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, when do you want me there? Now, you got to realize this is 9:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And she said 9 o'clock would have been nice.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I really can't make it, but how about tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
I explained the situation, that I dropped the girls off for school and I wouldn't be able to get there until.
Mark me absent for today. Take it off my paycheck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went out and my job was to provide relief for the one counselor that was there that was doing the 12 steps, and to get to know the emotional wellness program and relieve them when they needed a break.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions I asked her was, why me? Like, I have no formal education. I went to the University of John L. Labatt's,
Mm-hmm.
and that was all there was to it.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, you were a fit, which didn't make any sense to me at all. And then we started going through the programming, and I walked into, and what you have to realize is that at this time, I was probably, I'm going to say 24, 25 years sober,
Wow.
if not a little more.
Okay.
And I walked into the emotional wellness program, which I think is vital. But I walked in simply because I was going to be facilitating it.
You think it's vital now?
Right.
Now,
It was just something I had to do.
at the time.
At the time, I walked in, sat down in the middle of week 3 when they were introducing the concept of self-esteem and how it develops and how it's maintained.
Mm-hmm.
And when this woman that was facilitating got through the first page, I stopped her. And I said, you've got to be kidding. And she looked at me with a smile on her face and said, what do you mean I'm kidding? I said, well, this is my problem.
Mm.
She said, what? I said, my opinion of myself, because I could never put a finger on why I couldn't control my temper, why there were certain behaviors that I hadn't been able to control or work out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it started. That's when I went from being a counselor looking to facilitate a program to being her number one student for the next 5 weeks. I went through the entire program, just to learn about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it all started. I have dedicated my life now
Mm-hmm.
to people with addictions and their families because of the damage that my addiction caused.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, and I think it's more important for people to understand that I caused a lot of damage from 1985 until 2012.
Mm-hmm.
I damaged the lives of 3 young men and a woman, sober, and couldn't figure out why.
Huh.
And that's the important thing is unless we've got a handle on our emotions,
Mm-hmm.
all we are is sober, and sober is not enough.
So you and you engaged in peer support during this time.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Tons, right?
Yep.
You're very involved in
Yep.
the recovery community.
Yep.
Doing all of the things that they suggest
Yeah.
in the recovery community. And still you continued to cause harm in the lives of your loved ones.
Yeah. Still, because there's certain things that I learned that were going on that I was unaware of.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how many people understand what it's like to be shame-based,
Mm-hmm.
but shame-based works best being ashamed of yourself, and having low self-esteem work best against you if you don't know they exist.
Mm.
Like there's a movie out there that's got a line, The Usual Suspects. It has a line in the movie where they're talking about a criminal named Kaiser Sose.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they say is the toughest thing the devil has to do is to convince people he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And that's what shame and low self-esteem do. If you realized that your problem was your opinion of yourself and the fact that you were ashamed of every facet of your life, you would change it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a long drawn out process to change it, but simply being aware of it, it loses its effect or it loses its ability to affect you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's important is I never realized what the major problem was.
Mm-hmm.
I carried on. I was sober. I thought I was happy. I thought I was doing sort of a bang up job
Uh-huh.
until I found these things out about myself. And that's when I sat back and went, and I'm not saying I'm any better, any smarter,
Mm-hmm.
but if I missed it, how many other people have missed it?
Yeah.
You know, and how many other people are out there having this control them?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the number one offender in relapse is shame.
Really?
Yeah.
That's something that usually they say, well, it has been said, I don't know who they are that's saying it, resentment or relationships is the number one offender in relapse.
Yeah. But when you take apart relationships falling apart, when you take a look at resentments, one of the things that shows up in there, rears its ugly head in there,
Mm-hmm.
is being shame-based, is shame.
Mm.
Number one, shame is an emotion that will not allow you to learn from your mistakes. That's why we continue to repeat the same thing over and over and over again.
No.
We won't allow ourselves to learn
Why is that? Why does shame put up a wall?
because we think we're the problem.
Oh,
We don't think it's our behavior. We're beyond that. We think it's us as a person.
okay.
And I don't know really how to describe it, but it's that we're all born with a core that has all the values that we want. We reach out for externals to change that, whether it's drugs and alcohol, it can be sex, it can be shopping, but it can also be opinions of other people and how we were raised. And what ends up there is we end up feeling ashamed of who we are as a person
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And that controls our life.
Huh.
We don't even know it exists.
So you came to this realization.
Mhm.
Quite
Yeah.
prolific, I would imagine.
Oh,
Had to sit the fuck down, I bet.
I was sitting down. I was sitting down. What had happened was one of the things that I found out was a person like me who is controlled by shame is always angry.
Mm.
And I couldn't figure out what that was about
Mm-hmm.
until one day, and believe it or not, I was doing or working on information on anger issues. And I had this pile of paper and I went home,
Mhm.
drove home from Leipzig to Bigger where I live. And I had it on the dash of my truck, pulled into the driveway. And as soon as I pull into the driveway, My wife and the twins come out of the house and say, we're going for supper to Hannigan's. Great.
Mm-hmm.
In they get. Back the truck up on the street. Now I've got my window down. No problem. There's only one window down.
Mm-hmm.
As we're starting to go down the street, my wife hits the button on her side, opens up her window, and there is an explosion of white. All my papers are going everywhere, and I lost it. But for the first time in my life, my anger slowed down, like it was milliseconds. You know how they got those really slow motion cameras that can watch a bullet?
Yeah.
Well, that's what it was like.
Mm-hmm.
And there was the angry because of what had happened. And then there was the eye of the storm. There was a calm moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then shame kicked in. I was ashamed of the fact that I had reacted that way in front of my wife and grandchildren. And the anger that came out then was all directed at me. And it was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finally calmed down enough to realize what had just happened, to me, it was life-changing because I recognized what my problem really was.
Mm.
And I went from there, and I've worked with myself.
Mm-hmm.
I base just about everything that I do with other people on experiences that I've had because they're extremely common occurrences with people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that people have to really understand is that when that person comes home, when you get in a confrontation with a person in early recovery, you have to be very careful how you talk to them, because if you criticize them in any way, they feel you're attacking them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that we work with families with, is explaining that we need recovery teams. We need safe words. Like my infamous safe word, and I get a giggle out of it every time I say it, is hippopotamus.
Mm-hmm.
If I start acting like I did before, if I start acting out of character for me, and you say to me hippopotamus, I know that there's something I have to do. The only reason you're going to say that, unless we're in Africa, is the fact that I'm acting like a dickwad and need to change what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And it allows me to change without being confronted. Mm. And I think that's important.
So we're coming into the Christmas season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't want to make this all about the Christmas season, because there's tools in these conversations that can propagate throughout the year.
Yep.
But
those are your intimates. Those are the people that know you inside out.
Yeah.
And that's the ones where we can get into sometimes the most problems.
Well, and they've seen all of the mayhem,
they've seen it all,
and the chaos.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, they've probably been wronged.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. There's if you show me an alcoholic or an addict that hasn't wronged their family, and I'll show you someone who never got out of the closet.
Mm.
Yeah. So yeah. Christmas, my first Christmas. And it's what I use to explain to people about having a plan and an escape plan and have it all thought out. Mm-hmm. My theory is that we have to learn to respect what addiction can do to us. Mm-hmm. We can no longer be afraid of it. Mm-hmm. We have to respect it. If we respect it, we will respond to it, not react. Mm. And that's what we want to do, is build a process where we react or we respond to a situation in a positive light. Mm-hmm. My first Christmas, I was the only one in my family that didn't drink. Mm. So when we went to my parents for Christmas dinner, my escape plan was that if I started to feel uncomfortable, because I don't know about anybody else out there, but when I start to feel uncomfortable, I broadcast that. Everybody knows I'm uncomfortable.
Like, you broadcast that verbally, or you just sort of throw that energy?
It's just how we posture. Like, okay. I didn't realize the body language. It's through body language that people realize we're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I never realized that until then. So what I said was, when this happens, and it can happen at any family gathering, when it happens, I'm just going to disappear. I'm just going to go home. And to tell you what happened, it was around 9:30, and I was the only one that couldn't understand what was being said. They'd all sort of broken into drunkenese on me, and I couldn't understand. So I very quietly walked out, grabbed my jacket, and went home. And it was about 45 minutes later, my wife said, before my mom walked out and said, "Whoa, where's Larry?" And my wife looked around and said, "I don't know. I guess he went home." And that tells you how important I was. That took them almost an hour to figure it out.
And I have this resentment to this very day.
No, I thought it was funny because, well, all that tells you is that I did it right.
Yeah. Okay.
And I went back the next day and explained to my parents.
Mm-hmm.
My dad would understand. I knew that.
Dad in recovery?
No. My dad would understand me leaving.
Okay.
And the reason why I left.
Yeah.
But my mom, if I were to explain it to her at the time, she would have automatically said that she'd done something wrong and felt bad about me leaving. And I didn't want to wreck any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
I just walked out, explained to him that the next time I'm here, if I disappear and don't say anything, it's not that anybody has done anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's that I'm starting to feel uncomfortable, and I do not have the right to stop you from having an enjoyable time because I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
If I stick around, everybody's going to get upset. So I'm just going to go home.
Yeah.
And I do that to this day.
Yeah.
When we're at the lake.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important. Now, you mentioned what your experiences were going into these festivities.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can walk into an experience or a group of people and be sober, and they are completely sober, and I will end up feeling, I don't know, completely uncomfortable, completely dysregulated. And it sounds like you may also be experiencing that from time to time.
Yep.
Now, what do you tell someone? Walking into a family event, they find themselves not necessarily surrounded by alcohol, but surrounded by a situation that they don't inherently know how to deal with.
Okay.
Now, is that something that we would need to run away from, or how can we use those experiences to turn them into more of a exposure therapy?
Well, what you have to do, the first thing you have to do is figure out what it is that is making you feel uncomfortable. And the way I look at it is, what has triggered your negative belief about yourself? What has triggered this negative reaction that you're going to have? And then deal with it. Do not react to it. Step back, stop, think for a few minutes, reassess the situation completely, and choose the proper emotion and behavior to reflect that emotion. And it's a whole series of thoughts. In Saskatchewan and in most public schools, every kid in the province knows that if you catch fire, to stop, drop, and roll. For people in recovery, we have to have something that we can think of when we get into those situations.
We can stop, drop, and roll.
When we can stop, drop, and roll.
Okay.
And that's what we have. That's what we're trying to develop now. Is 4 or 5 things that you can do while you're standing there. It'll take 10 seconds, but it'll allow you to analyze what's going on and come up with a response rather than a reaction. A reaction is instinctual. It's defensive, and it's impulsive, and it's aggressive. So we want to get away from that and start to sort of re-enter, if you want to refer to it as that, into that society thing where we actually sit down, go through this stuff and go, okay, this is what I do, and get through the other side. We can, one of the things when we get into those kinds of social situations, one of the things I always maintain is that we want to get invited back.
Yeah.
Like you're going there. So I had an uncomfortable experience with one individual that was there with me, but I want to get invited back. So I don't walk out the door and kick over the table.
Yeah.
I want to exit grandly. And that's what you do. You reassess the whole situation and respond accordingly.
So give us some examples then. Situations. I mean, you say everything that you share is as a result of your lived experience, right? So give us some examples. I mean, you gave us one where you're in a situation with family that are drinking, you become uncomfortable, you leave, right?
Yeah.
Now, moving further into recovery, you go to a situation that there's a lot of people that maybe you don't necessarily know. What are some of these things? You said you want to develop 4 or 5 things, 4 or 5 tools in your toolbox where you can stop, drop, and roll. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about that.
So I walk into a room where I don't know a person.
Yep.
First thing I'm tempted to walk in and crawl into a corner somewhere.
Yeah.
I'll stand in the middle of the room.
Yeah. I scroll. I open my phone and I'll try to look like I'm busy and I'm just scrolling Facebook.
No.
Yeah.
To me, that's hiding.
Yeah. Totally.
And what I do, like for me, I was the guy that would sit at the back of the room. and watch until I felt comfortable. I'll now walk into basically the center of the room and possibly start talking to people that I may never have talked to before.
Force yourself.
Challenge myself to do that.
Okay.
And that keeps me from falling back into that thing of thinking of myself that I'm lesser than, that I'm unlovable, that I'm incapable. If I do that and get a positive response, then I know I'm doing okay.
What's that self-talk sound like? You walk into a room, you're nervous, you want to hide. No.
When I say to myself,
Yeah.
You fucking loser.
Still.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
I am one of those guys, and I'm not embarrassed to say it. I have chronic, severe low self-esteem. I work on that. I have to work on that every day. If I don't, what ends up happening is that's all I think about. I have to switch over and start looking at the positive things in my life, the successes I've had. And that's where you walk up and talk to somebody and they respond positively back to you. It reinforces that part of my brain that I'm trying to activate. And to me, it's all about challenging your belief system.
So there's a dialogue.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You fucking loser. What's the other voice saying?
The other voice is saying, well, it's not that bad. Come on.
Okay.
Let's go over here and see what they have to say. Yeah.
Cool.
I can remember I hid in a bathroom in Montreal. I was, when I was working on programming with my employer, I went down and I was meeting with the senior vice presidents of the company to discuss the programming that were starting to develop. And I went to Montreal, I got there and I had an anxiety attack.
Where did you have an anxiety attack?
In the headquarters building of CN Rail.
Standing in front of all of these people?
No, in the hallway.
Oh,
walking in.
Thank God. There's still hope.
And there's still hope. And I walked into the bathroom and it took me about 5 minutes to convince myself that the only reason I'm here is to answer questions. And that little voice said, well, what if you don't know the answer? And the other little voice said, you're the only one that does. You wrote it. Ooh, okay. So in I went, and it was and it was a successful meeting.
Yeah.
But if I'm not careful, that negative side of my brain will do everything. And that's the cognitive part where we have to really work on how we think and see ourselves. Then that's an ongoing process. I hate to say to people that the 5 weeks you spend in treatment or the first year it's going to be over.
Yeah.
My recovery and working on myself will be over the day they throw dirt on me.
Yeah.
Until then, I'll be constantly learning.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not learning, I'm going backwards.
So, the dialogues now, and something else that's being mentioned in the chat here is becoming the observer as opposed to the experiencer. Now, is that a conscious thought in your mind as well? Separating the two, realizing that I am not this emotion?
Oh, I'll tell you what. That goes, if people out there are familiar with the 12 steps, that's where the unmanageability comes in step one. The internal unmanageability, one of the things that is we have to separate ourselves from our behavior. And it takes a lot of work. When we separate ourselves from the behaviors, then we can start to work on ourselves. Because when we don't, we just say it's us. That's where you get into the shame stuff again. But it's how we have to do that. We have to realize, and so many people don't realize that they're not their emotion. They're not what they've displayed. They're not their behavior.
Yeah.
They sit around and when they say things like, you make me angry, you make me sad, you make me happy, you're giving away your power.
Yeah.
You're giving away your personal control over who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And that's so important that we get back and maintain. One of the things that we get back when we sober up is the freedom to choose. And it's freedom to choose what we're going to do next. Whether we drink or we don't drink, or we do drugs or don't do drugs. But it also gives us the freedom to choose what emotion we're going to display, because that's a choice. And a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people think it's automatic. We choose the emotion, and then how it's displayed.
So why do we choose the negative ones? Why do we choose to display and to exude anxiety? Why do we choose to feel fear and display fear?
That's if you want to get into it, it's all based on a very unhealthy belief system.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on how we think. We think and act in a very depressive, negative, unrealistic fashion.
Who is we?
People in general, especially people in addiction, tend to see things, always see the dark side of things. They never see the bright side.
Is that because the brain wants to get us high?
That goes right back to when we learned how to think.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way I try and explain it is like, who taught you how to ride a bike?
Mm.
You know, who taught you how to read? Who taught you how to write?
Mm-hmm.
Who taught you how to think?
Huh.
Thinking is self-taught.
Yeah.
And we start to think long before we can ever communicate.
Well, and I think it's a product of our environment as well.
Absolutely. The
Yeah.
product, the environment.
Yeah.
And what it is because most people in addictions are very emotional thinkers. They
Yeah.
think very emotionally.
Oh God, I am. Ugh.
So when we're filing stuff, when we learn something new, we take it and we file it where we're feeling at the time. Happy, sad, depressed. That's where we file it. So that event is now a depressed event.
Mm.
Every time that happens, we're going to go to where we think it is and we'll be depressed. That's how we think. And that goes on once we establish that way of thinking. All we do from then on is gather information that adds a credence to that thought. Like if you, how do you say this? If you think you're unlovable and you file that in the unlovable file and you're sad,
Mm-hmm.
all you're going to do for the rest of your life until somebody corrects you is you're going to look for times when you feel unlovable and sad.
Confirmation bias.
Confirmation. And you'll miss out on all the positive things that say you're loved,
Mm-hmm.
and you're a success.
Mm-hmm.
We will avoid those. That's how we think. That's how we gather information. And then it becomes so ingrained in us that that's all we think of. And that's where we get into the negative core beliefs and that stuff. That's how we get controlled by that.
Yeah.
So it's so important that people learn that just because you're feeling like this way, you can change that by choosing a different emotion and choosing a different way of seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
If we change how we see ourselves, how we see the world will change, and how the world sees us will change.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things we have to instill in people,
Mm-hmm.
is you've got to change how you think long before you know anything else. It's the most important part of any kind of therapy like that,
Mm-hmm.
is changing how you think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it all goes based on how you think, influences how you feel, which again influences your behavior.
Yeah.
The key to it is changing how you think. If you can change how you think, you don't get to the behavior part.
Give us some examples. How do you, okay, example. I'll give an example.
Okay,
And then
yeah.
we can work through it.
Okay, sure.
Okay. So
Mhm.
from my lived experience, I started this podcast
Okay.
almost 3 years ago.
Okay.
I'm quite surprised at how it's turned out.
Mm-hmm.
I look forward to seeing where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Not a day doesn't go by where I have at least a few moments of that day where I am riddled in fear that this isn't going to work.
Okay.
Now, look around you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's working.
I think it is.
I think I can have a little bit of rest
Mm-hmm.
in that this is going in a good direction. But some days it doesn't matter. That fear comes in. This ain't going to work. Where's the dollars going to come from next year? Where's the dollars going to come in 5 years?
Yep.
What am I going to do in 5 years, Larry?
Yes, I don't know.
You know? So how would you interrupt something like that?
First off, you have to realize what's going on. You're being triggered.
Okay. We're going to talk about triggers.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You're being triggered to an emotional response or emotional reaction. When you get triggered in these kinds of situations, the thought process is, boom, straight down into your negative core belief that I'm a failure. Now, it's very important for people to understand that the idea that is personified by your negative core belief that you're a loser, unlovable, only has to be active less than 1% of the time before it'll start to affect how you feel and your behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have to do is realize, okay, I get triggered. I start to think I'm a loser. I'm a failure. This isn't going to work. And you throw a bunch of negative self-talk at you. Once you recognize that, you can interrupt that process anywhere simply by finding the positives, simply by looking around the room and saying, yep, I'm wrong. This is working.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you've got a million examples of why it works.
Mm-hmm.
You only need one example of why it doesn't to trigger you.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to start looking at the things and concentrate on the things that are successful about your programming
and
about what you're doing.
And a lot more of them.
Oh,
because we are biased. For me, one bad thought can wreck my experience, and it takes 100 good ones to bring me back.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been conditioned my whole life, and by my own accord, to think that this isn't going to work, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
it's called emotional reasoning. You think one bad thing that's going to happen, that's happened once, will happen all the time and continue to.
Yeah.
That's the way we think. That's a thinking process. That's how we think.
Mm-hmm.
We have to change that.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at that one bad thing that happened and correct yourself, look at it, figure out what mistakes you may or may not have made and repair them and move forward. You've learned from that mistake. You're out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to change how we think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basic stuff. That is, we're in the process right now of re-looking at our emotional wellness program.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to be the first module that we put out, that we do in the group sessions, is going to be untangling how we think,
Mm-hmm.
working on that and lay the groundwork for everything else.
Emotional sobriety.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, triggers. Let's talk
Okay.
about triggers and moving into the season where there will be family
Millions. Yeah.
and billions of triggers throughout the world coming your way in 2 days.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about that. How to recognize a trigger, how to come face to face with that trigger, and how to move past that trigger.
Okay. A lot of the time, one of the things people must understand is that you will be triggered by anything in recovery that triggered you in your addiction.
Okay.
Like it may be having beers with a friend and you bump into them and you could be triggered to have, to go for a drink or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The emotional triggers are the ones that really get me going. Is when I start to feel, and again, we work on finding things like your negative core belief, what you truly believe about yourself. All of a sudden, when that happens, or when it's about to happen, one of the things that I like to tell people is start to rely on what your body is telling you. If something is going to happen, chances are you're going to feel some anxiety before you even realize it's going on. Your body is going to tell you something. You have to be aware and cognizant of what your body is telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Then you watch for a trigger. You watch things like making negative predictions. This isn't going to work. I'm going to fall flat on my face.
Mm-hmm.
And then negative self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two things that accompany a trigger as it happens.
Mm-hmm.
So you may not really understand what the trigger is or what it is that's happening, but you do know that it is going on because this is how I am reacting to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's without any thought.
Mm-hmm.
Then you move on. Now you can start adopting some of the stuff, inputting positives into your life and looking. But a trigger is something that you have to be able to recognize.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it gets by the first stage, the best way I've ever just been able to describe a trigger is it's like pulling the trigger on a gun.
Yeah. Once the bullet's out.
Once you pull the trigger, you may not be able to stop it.
Yeah.
But
For a time.
Yeah. But relapse is a process. It is not part of it's not part of recovery. Relapse is
we're going to get into that argument.
Oh no, it's not a part of relapse. It's not a part of recovery. It's still part of the disease.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's and I'm not saying that okay, definition of a relapse.
Yeah.
Me's long term. I'm not talking about going out on Friday night and having a beer. That's messing up.
So the relapse has already happened by the time the bottle hits your lips.
Oh, oh yeah. Yeah, you have relapsed emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually long before that, before alcohol ever crosses your lips or drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we have to be aware of. The behavior that we're trying to stop is the using and abusing of drugs and alcohol. And we can stop it anywhere along the line. We can interrupt that by simply using positive affirmations, identifying what it is, and starting to deal with it.
Kathy says this is one of the best shows ever. And I would like to give Kathy some props, because had Kathy not said, I can't hear anything, we would have just been talking to ourselves.
Yeah, that would have been interesting.
Yeah. So if you're just tuning in now, there was no sound, but my microphones were turned off when we started the live stream, and Kathy was like, I can't hear anything. And my throat went in, my stomach went into my throat, and the water drained out of my mouth. And so, but that's an example. That is a trigger.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That in itself is a trigger. It took me a couple of minutes to recover from that. You know, like, because that to me, like, this is the sugar, this is the cherry on top, man. I work hard all week, you know, to make
do this,
to do all of this and to promote and to do all the things. If this 1 hour gets fucked up, that is bad news for me.
Oh yeah.
And not necessarily in a financial way. I mean, a little bit financial, but but the biggest consequence is that I have to survive myself with that thought.
Yeah. We're our own worst enemy when it comes to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I have to listen to myself and feel these emotions that are just like, you failed, you're a loser, you can't, all of that. That's what I'm scared of.
Yeah. And then you look at the screen and find out what Kathy said.
Yeah.
This is the best one you've ever had.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you?
I got past the trigger, didn't I?
You got past the trigger.
So what else?
What else? An awful lot of family members don't really understand addiction because they've never been they've never been addicted to anything.
Or substances. Everybody's addicted to something.
To something.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, and one of the big ones is, how do we handle a relapse? How do we handle a slip?
From the outside looking in.
Yeah, from the outside looking in. Like, how do we deal with that? And there's a lot of ways. And one of the things I've tried to explain to the family members is that addiction, alcoholism, drug addiction,
gambling, whatever,
are a disease. It's a disease of addiction. The disease of addiction is also a terminal disease. Addiction's only reason for having anything to do with you is to take absolutely everything you have. And when they get that, come back and take you. And what we tell them is, how would you respond to a family member who's been diagnosed with having cancer, heart disease, diabetes, any number of terminal diseases, if their disease came back? You would handle them with compassion, understanding, empathy, and try and figure out what they did do wrong, if they did anything wrong, and fix it with them. We can't get angry at addicts because they drink or do drugs again, or alcoholics.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the beast.
Yeah. We
have to have compassion for them. We have to be able to sit down and talk to them and be concerned about it, because this is serious stuff. Like, and I'll be honest with you, besides addiction, I deal with heart disease. I'm a cancer survivor. I'm a diabetic. I have COPD. Like, I deal on a daily basis with about 5 terminal diseases, and they don't scare me, but I'm fully aware of, if they come back, I know that I have a support system. And that's what we have to have with them, is a support system. And that's how we handle relapse or slips or messing up.
So let me be devil's advocate here for a second.
Yeah.
So you're saying have compassion, be kind, as though they were a cancer patient or something.
Yeah.
So now, what do you say to this when someone says, yeah, well, a cancer patient doesn't fucking steal my car. The cancer patient doesn't break into my bedroom and steal money out of my drawer. How am I supposed to be compassionate and show kindness if I can't have them anywhere near me?
Because you have to understand, number one, you're dealing with the behaviors of an addicted person. You're not dealing with the addicted person.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the behaviors that we got to deal with.
Okay.
If a guy goes out, what do? He didn't steal your car. He didn't take your money. He went out and drank some beers and came back.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with that? Like, yeah, you're going to have that. They are responsible.
Yeah.
Because we're saying not getting wishy-washy with them.
Yeah.
They're still responsible.
Yeah.
But it's our role to make sure that they are responsible, that they're aware they're responsible, and that we love them unconditionally.
Okay.
That was one of the things that when I first sobered up, we went in my home group once a year. We had a meeting with the Al-Anons.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the women in the Al-Anon group told me, is that we will love you unconditionally until you can learn to love yourself again.
Mm-hmm.
And that applies. That's family. They've got to know that you love them unconditionally, that this is another hiccup
Mm-hmm.
that you can cross.
Mm-hmm.
We can't, you don't throw them out. You don't throw them out with the bathwater.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to have compassion for them. They can't help it. Most of us realize, especially as people in recovery, that if you do drink, it was beyond my control to stop.
Mm.
And that's what it's not a bad habit. It's not a bad choice.
Mm-hmm.
This is a compulsion that they're dealing with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
That if given the opportunity, will come back.
Yeah.
And if it does rear its ugly head again, we have to be there as a family, as part of their recovery team, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
Like every addict has to have a recovery team, your partner, your kids. Involve your kids in it.
Mm-hmm.
You involve them, make them an active part of your recovery, and they become proud of who they are and who you are because of that.
Yeah.
And that's what you build. That's how you build that family unit.
Mm-hmm.
Give them the right to call you on your stuff. And that's where the hippopotamus comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dad, you're acting like a hippopotamus. Boom. He doesn't have to say anything but that.
Yeah.
And you know that there's something I have to take care of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you take care of it. It's a recovery team. If you have a house with only one person in recovery in it, that's not going to be
a problem.
It's going to be a problem right away.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be at least 2 programs in there. And I would also recommend that any alcoholic or addict attend the Al-Anon or the Nar-Anon program, because you too are in love with an addict or an alcoholic. You're just kind of afraid to admit it.
Unpack that. What do you mean?
Well,
Let's be
you're
crystal clear about this.
Well, I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I love myself.
Oh.
I like to know how my behavior has affected me, as if I was just a person standing on the outside.
So you're saying educate the observer
Oh.
about the experiencer.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
I think that's important that
Yeah.
we find out. And by going and exposing ourselves to Al-Anon, we expose ourselves to what we've done as a group, like as a group of alcoholics have done to people that we may not have heard. Your wife may have been afraid to say that to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we have to do, is we have to, the more we find out about ourselves and how we affected everybody,
Mm-hmm.
the better we are.
Hmm.
An alcoholic is like taking a ball and throwing it in a lake. The ripples go out. Those ripples affect everyone they touch,
Mm.
positively or negatively. Every behavior is like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be very aware that we have affected people, that we may not even realize the effect we've had.
That is such a beautiful way to put that. Educate the observer in yourself
Mm-hmm.
by going to Al-Anon
Yeah. Just
to
find
improve
out.
the relationship with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever thought about it in that way before.
Oh,
Larry, I knew you were going to blow my mind at some point. Like, I just knew it. I woke up this morning and I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen. Aaron says, we are here not to be a teacher, but rather an awakener.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
I think we can be both.
Yeah, you don't have to agree with Aaron. He's tough. He can handle
Oh, no,
it.
but I think that the more I learn, the more I'm woken up about who I am, the better teacher I become.
Mm.
One of the things that I firmly believe is that people pay far more attention to what I do than what I say. So as a as a teacher, I am broadcasting constantly through my behaviors on what it is. I'm not arrogant enough to figure that anybody who goes into recovery is going to want to recover the way Larry did.
Yeah.
I'm not that arrogant, but I do think that people will walk up and say, what did you do?
Yeah.
Just find out and direct them to where the road I took and say, okay, find it out. Go explore. I'll help you when I can.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm the example rather than the teacher,
Okay.
So that's the way I look at it.
Example of the end result or the ongoing result, I should say.
The ongoing result. Sometimes I'm the best example of what not to do.
You still fuck up?
Oh,
Come on.
fuck.
Larry.
Every day. Every day.
Yeah.
That's the only way you learn. What do you learn if you do it all right?
I can't imagine what a boring life it would be.
Oh, come on. How much fun would it be?
Yeah. And that I say that too. Like, I need a certain amount of anxiety. I need a certain amount of fear of things might be going wrong.
If you don't have anxiety, if you don't have things going wrong, you will turn into a turnip.
Yeah. You're not working hard enough at life.
You're not challenging yourself at all.
Yeah. My friend Alan Kaler, Al's a keynote speaker. And this elder said to him, if you ever come to a place where you walk up on that stage and you're not nervous and you don't have anxiety, it's time for you to stop doing it.
Yeah, I believe absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm facilitating a group, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that I have to really be open-minded.
Yeah.
Because when I'm sitting in a room with 5 or 6 or 10 people, one of those people has the ability, regardless of how long they've been sober, to stop me dead in my tracks and look at my recovery in a different light.
Yeah.
And learn from that. And that is so important with people, is that we realize that we're constantly learning. If we don't have those anxiety things, you're not challenging yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You try and explain to people in early recovery that being uncomfortable is a good thing.
It's a gift, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gets tiring.
Oh, yeah. But if you're uncomfortable, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
And people have to understand that when you become comfortable, you become very complacent.
Being comfortable is a terrible place for me.
Yeah.
It's a very dangerous place for me to be.
Your comfort zone is a place where every dream you've ever had
goes to die. That's true.
And people have to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you're uncomfortable, things are good.
Yeah.
How comfortable do you think a snake is when he sheds his skin?
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't want to find out.
Yeah.
But I can imagine it's not very comfortable.
Yeah.
But look at what comes out the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's look at some more comments. I got seeing some names here I haven't seen for a while.
Oh.
Yeah. We got Twinkle. I have seen Twinkle recently, and that's her real name, by the way.
Twinkle.
Yeah, her name's Twinkle. Isn't that amazing? What's up, Twinkle? Thank you again for joining us. Twinkle says, what if they gaslight you when you say you don't have that money they need when they tell you they're starving? A mother wouldn't let her child go hungry, but when it's not food hunger and the mama knows.
You know what? I think that's an individual type. I don't think there's,
Mm-hmm.
it all depends on the individual. Like I know people that would just send you away.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You give them money for food?
I would take them down and buy them food.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've done that. That's not an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A little earlier, you said, how do we deal with someone who is having a slip or a relapse?
Mm-hmm.
How do we deal with that? So I'm a family member and I have someone who was doing well in what most would call recovery,
Mm-hmm.
abstinence for a while. And suddenly they drop off, they're gone, and they're calling for money and they're calling for things again. How do you be okay in your life as your loved one continues to burn theirs down?
Yeah.
Because your life matters too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like one of the things that we forget about a lot of the time is that we're very valuable people and we have to take care of ourselves, and inviting that kind of chaos back into our lives isn't healthy for any of us.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be very, very careful on what we do, how we get close to them again.
Perhaps even including the person who's using, inviting them back into this place where they have opportunities to breed
Mm-hmm.
chaos.
Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts. Actually,
Okay.
So, no, not yet. I almost forgot about the question I was going to.
Oh, okay.
Onyx's question here. Where is it now? Onyx asks, Larry, what advice would you give your younger self before addiction?
Have at her.
Really?
Yeah. If I changed, and that's, it would be nice to be able to go back and do that. But to give myself any kind of advice now would eliminate all the mistakes that I made that ended up having me here right now.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say to my younger self is, I will forgive you no matter what you've done.
Mm.
Rather than saying stop. Because if I didn't drink, why would I have been here? I would have never made it here.
Yeah.
You know, I would never find the niche that I'm really good at. I would never find things that I'm really, really good at to do for other people.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say to my younger self is, I will forgive you no matter what you've done or how you feel.
Do you think that the harm you've brought to other people has been productive in their lives?
We're the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And our worst behavior are some of our best lessons. Yeah.
So it's like, who's to say what should and what shouldn't have happened?
Right.
Whose
Absolutely.
decision is that?
Yeah. It's not mine.
Yeah.
It's beyond my control.
Yeah. Yeah.
When a teacher is ready, the student will appear. So
here comes Larry's bad behavior.
No, but that's
save the day.
That's just it. Like your behavior teaches people.
Yeah.
You may be an example of how not to talk to people in a bar, and how not to do this, how not to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not necessarily what we think of when we talk about harm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, someone out there struggling today, going into their first Christmas season sober, or maybe even just considering getting sober, what would you say to them?
If you think you have a problem, you do. Don't let anybody talk you out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Do whatever's necessary and surround yourself with like-minded people.
Mm-hmm.
Develop a recovery team, which includes your intimates, your family members. Make them a part of this struggle so that you don't think you're doing it by yourself. And give it a try one day at a time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Larry.
Not a problem. I enjoyed it.
All right. Take care.
Yeah.
All right. If you got something out of today's episode, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. We go live every Friday morning, every Sunday evening. We've got lots of content for you to catch up on, so there's no shortage of things to listen to. If you don't have time to sit and watch us, you can jump over to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. We're all over the place. If you can't find them, if you can't find us, it's not my fault. Have a good Christmas. We will see you on the other side. Take care.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.